Welcome to the Southwest Florida International Airport Master Plan Update. This is the second presentation for the Master Plan Update. At the end of the presentation, information will be provided on how you can provide comments and be part of the Master Plan process. The Lee County Port Authority operates the Southwest Florida International Airport, or RSW for short. The Port Authority has brought together a team of subject matter experts that have extensive experience in their respective fields, and particularly at RSW. The local engineering firm, Johnson Engineering, is serving as the prime consultant, working closely with the senior leadership team from ESA, Recondo, and Atkins. My name is Mike Arnold, and I will be serving as the primary author of the Master Plan. My responsibility is to ensure that the Master Plan is written in a single voice that cohesively integrates the detailed information developed during the course of the study. I will be joined today by Pete Recondo of Recondo & Associates and Darren Larson of Atkins, who will present information on both the North Area Plan and Terminal Gate planning efforts being conducted as part of the Master Plan update. The Master Plan will be completed over a 2-year period. The project kicked off in May of 2021, and the first deliverables, notably the existing conditions, aviation forecast, and preliminary terminal gate analysis, were delivered in October of 2021. The draft runway demand capacity analysis subchapter is available for review on the project website and will be discussed in today's presentation. We will also be presenting on certain elements of the master plan, such as the North Area Plan and the terminal gate planning analysis, that have been accelerated as near-term priorities to meet the more immediate needs of the airport. The project will continue into the next round of deliverables in late 2022, and so on. Each round of deliverables will offer an opportunity for public and stakeholder comment. The final deliverable, the Comprehensive Master Plan Report, will be submitted to the FAA and FDOT in July of 2023. As a refresher from the last presentation, we'll start with a few definitions that will be used throughout this presentation and the master planning process. An enplanement is a departing passenger. Total passengers is the sum of departing and arriving passengers. We typically assume that for every departure or enplanement, there will be one arrival. This means that to count the total passengers at an airport, you would multiply enplanements by 2. An aircraft operation is either an aircraft takeoff or a landing. Total operations is the sum of all takeoffs and landings. In September 2021, the Lee County Port Authority Board approved a forecast of passengers and operations that will be used in determining the facility needs for the master plan. These forecasts project the need to accommodate 6 million commercial enplanements in 2025 and just over 8.5 million enplanements by the end of the 2040 planning period. Commercial operations are projected to increase from just over 86,000 operations in 2025 to more than 121,000 operations by 2040. The ability of the airfield and runway system to accommodate existing and projected activity is a key consideration in the master planning process. Efforts have been underway for nearly 2 decades to ensure that the airport is positioned to accommodate long-term demand. RSW is the second busiest single-runway commercial service airport in the United States behind San Diego International. San Diego International experiences a relatively consistent level of aircraft activity throughout the year, while RSW has seasonal peaking characteristics that greatly reduce its overall operational capacity. The FAA details a methodology to be used in estimating an airport's theoretical capacity, which was referred to as the annual service volume, or ASV. As aircraft activity approaches an airport's ASV, the average delay per operation begins to grow exponentially, and this delay becomes more extreme during peak operational periods. A number of factors are considered when calculating ASV. These include the number of runways. Widely spaced parallel runways have the greatest capacity, the mix of large and small aircraft. Due to spacing requirements and concerns about wake turbulence, airports that primarily serve a similar or homogeneous mix of aircraft have a greater capacity than airports that serve a wide range of aircraft. Weather conditions. Clouds, ceiling, and visibility impact capacity due to the increased aircraft spacing requirements. Finally, the aircraft demand profile and peaking characteristics affect capacity. The FAA's formula for calculating ASV first requires the calculation of the airport runway system's weighted hourly capacity. This is influenced by the configuration of the airfield, weather conditions, the number and location of taxiway exits, and the number of touch and goes or pattern activity. The weighted capacity is multiplied by the daily ratio, or the ratio of annual demand to the average daily demand during the peak period, and the hourly ratio, or ratio of the daily demand to the average peak hour demand during the peak month. The ASV increases as peaking becomes less pronounced, meaning that the airport can accommodate more activity with less delay. Conversely, ASV decreases as peaking becomes more pronounced. As indicated in the first master plan presentation, RSW not only experiences seasonal peaking, but has the highest seasonal peaking characteristics of a major commercial service airport in the United States. The right side of this slide shows the variation in monthly aircraft operation levels throughout the course of a year, and the top 4 lines show the projected activity levels through 2040. Unlike San Diego, which accommodates similar activity levels throughout the year, RSW experiences very large variations in demand throughout the course of the year. This means that the airport will experience delays that will increase exponentially during peak periods, but few delays during off-peak periods. An estimate of the current ASV was calculated based on the most recent year of normal activity, or 2019. The resulting ASV is just over 146,000 operations. Based on the 2019 ASV and the board-approved forecast, the airport activity would not reach 100% of ASV until shortly after the master plan's 2040 horizon. It's important to note that if demand during peak periods were to grow faster than non-peak periods, the ASV would decrease and be reached slightly earlier. And conversely, if the peak periods were to grow at a slower pace than overall activity, the ASV would increase, delaying the year in which the airport would reach its ASV. What does ASV mean relative to new runway timing? FAA guidance issued in 2019 recommends that planning for a new runway proceed when an airport reaches 60% of ASV. 60% of ASV is just over 87,600 operations. The airport previously exceeded that level between 2005 and 2008 before activity dropped as a result of the last recession, airline consolidation, and the upgauging of aircraft fleet, which allowed each aircraft operation to move more passengers. RSW has again exceeded 60% of ASV with the highest level of activity that the airport has experienced in 2021. Where are we in the process to prepare for a new runway? Significant work has been completed as part of the airport redevelopment program, which included the midfield terminal relocation and preparations for a future south parallel. This includes land acquisition, site preparation, environmental permitting and mitigation, and construction to support the airport's future 2-runway configuration, including a midfield aircraft rescue and firefighting facility, midfield crossfield taxiway system, and a midfield airport traffic control tower. As we look forward to future actions, it's important to understand how activity is projected to grow into the future. Total operations are projected to reach just over 135,000 operations by 2040. FAA guidance indicates that development should begin when an airport reaches 80% of ASV and within 5 years of activity reaching ASV under the current approved forecast. It is anticipated that the airport will reach 80% of ASV in 2033 and 100% of ASV in 2043. Based on FAA 5-year guidance, development would begin in or around 2038. Based on the projected activity levels in ASV, actions beginning in or around 2038 would include the FP&L power line land acquisition and relocation, new runway design, the new runway construction, with commissioning of the new runway in approximately 2043. Prior to 2038, there will be ongoing actions related to permit compliance and management, which will allow for the runway development to proceed when appropriate. I will now turn it over to Pete, who will walk you through the North Area planning effort.
Thank you, Mike. The planning process for the North Area's aviation use parcels helped define the near to long-term land use plan and development vision. The North Area Plan focuses on airport property located between the existing runway and the Skyplex Commerce Park. As shown on this slide, the property currently serves a wide variety of aviation-related uses as well as airport support functions. These uses and functions include the airport's existing maintenance facilities, air freight buildings, general aviation facilities managed by private sky aviation services, airport support facilities and infrastructure like FPL and electric vaults and cell phone towers, and fuel storage facilities. Also considered in this existing conditions inventory are recently sold interests granted to Capstone and Intrepid. The overriding goal for the North Area Plan is to define an incremental, cohesive development plan that protects and allows for expansion by existing tenants, enables future leasehold interests and development by new tenants, avoids fragmented parcelization of the property, and minimizes the need for immediate investments in utilities infrastructure, wetland mitigation, and facility demolition or relocation as a predecessor for new development. As part of this planning process, we benchmarked several airports throughout the country, focusing on medium or large commercial service airports with passenger or general aviation activity levels generally consistent with the fiscal year 2040 projected levels for Southwest Florida International Airport, those which Mike just previously presented. The airports benchmarked, which are denoted on this slide, include, but were not limited to, Nashville International, Orlando International, Minneapolis-St. Paul International, Portland International, St. Louis Lambert International, and Tampa International airports. A few of these airports are also part of an airport system operated by a single entity, meaning these are commercial airports that are part of a larger airport system comprising one or more general aviation airports. In these sampled airports, the commercial service airport serves predominantly business and corporate aviation aircraft fleets, whereas the other general aviation airports in the system handle the more traditional general aviation operations, typically served by piston and turboprop aircraft. One of the airports benchmarked, Orlando International Airport, focused on the West Ramp area, which accommodates a diverse group of tenants. They include a couple of general aviation fixed-base operators leasing between 17 and 29 acres of land, a couple of cargo tenants occupying between 18 acres and 35 acres, and a couple of maintenance, repair, and overhaul servicing facilities, noted as MRO facilities on this slide, generally comprising 26 to 27 acres. Also worth noting is the apron depth, approximately 650 linear feet, that has been protected in order to not limit the size of aircraft from general aviation to cargo fleets that can be accommodated within this aircraft apron. There are also some other smaller ancillary facilities included within the West Ramp, like aircraft fueling facilities, an aircraft rescue and firefighting facility, denoted as an ARF, ARFF on the image, and a USDA inspection facility. One key observation from the West Ramp layout is the arrangement of uses and tenants. Note that there are no direct adjacencies between common land uses. For instance, cargo tenants are not located adjacent to one another. Neither are general aviation nor MRO facilities. This table summarizes the information collected for the various benchmarked airports. It presents the total acreage inventoried for the property or zone analyzed for each functional area, meaning cargo and logistics, general aviation, and maintenance, repair, and overhaul areas. For example, the acreages shown for Orlando International only correspond to the West Ramp. They are not airport-wide figures. In each instance, the information presented includes the total acreage for that functional area. Also shown in parentheses are the number of leaseholds or areas included within the total acreage and the range each leaseholder area comprises. We also included an e-commerce category and benchmarked Amazon's Lakeland and Chicago Rockford operations areas. The combined results of this benchmarking effort are summarized in the far right side of the slide, outlined in the yellow box. The average acreages for each of these 4 functional areas are being used in the North Ramp analyses as the minimum acreages that should be preserved to support future development by a single or multiple tenants or operators. In addition to the minimum land use planning targets shown again in this slide on the far right-hand side, we also collected general planning metrics for the sizing of buildings, aircraft parking aprons, and landside support areas for trucking operations and staging, as well as vehicular parking. These general planning metrics were used to develop representative layouts and a development vision for the North area based on the preferred land use plan established for the North area. The recommended vision plan for the North area represents an efficient layout that balances facilities with supporting airside, landside, and logistics or support phases. The far ends of the site illustrate further growth opportunities for cargo and MRO development, but require wetland or stormwater system mitigation in order to support development of those sites. The ultimate development of these parcels will likely vary and will ultimately be determined by the lessees of each parcel. However, the vision plan helps define the boundaries for the various land use zones proposed in the recommended land use plan. Following the formulation of several land use scenarios and multiple work sessions with airport staff, a recommended land use was identified. The recommended plan fulfills the overriding goals previously stated and supports an incremental development plan that seeks to efficiently utilize the property. However, it is important to recognize that this recommended land use plan is intended to support decision-making for airport staff as emerging leasing opportunities emerge. It is possible that some adjustments or refinements to this land use plan are necessary in order to enable emerging leasing opportunities, while still aiming to preserve efficient use of the property as further future development materializes. The recommended land use plan protects for 2 zones totaling 82 acres for cargo development, approximately 80 acres for general aviation expansion and new development, 70 acres for MRO development, and a 44-acre land use parcel for an e-commerce operator and its logistics support functions. I will now turn it over to Darren, who will walk you through the terminal gate planning process.
Thank you, Pete. I would like to start with a summary of what we covered during our last presentation. You may recall that the team has evaluated several different concept alternatives for providing the additional gates needed to meet the forecasted demand at RSW. These alternatives included expansions to existing concourses B, C, D, as well as new concourses A and E. The image you see here includes a combination of all these potential alternatives. In order to evaluate the pros and cons of these alternatives, we developed a matrix comparing them using 28 different criteria in 4 different subcategories. A summary of the results of this evaluation matrix is shown on this slide. The Concourse A and E alternatives ended up scoring much higher because they don't result in operational impacts during construction, do not result in loss of gates during construction, and result in lower overall cost and faster construction schedule. To recap the summary recommendation from our presentation in November, the analysis indicated we should plan for enough additional gates to satisfy the peak hour demand in the average day of March in 2035. Both the Concourse A and E alternatives can meet this requirement and score well on the evaluation matrix, but Concourse E is preferred based on a shorter taxi distance to the existing runway, The proximity to the existing utility infrastructure and chiller building resulting in lower overall cost, and the alternative doesn't have potential impacts to International Gate B1. The final number of additional gates needed to meet the 2035 demand was subject to additional analysis and evaluation. One of the criteria that was still subject to further evaluation was the impact of anticipated changes in the size of aircraft serving the RSW market, or the fleet mix, as it is commonly referred to in airport planning lingo. The aviation industry is facing the aging out of Boeing 757 and 767 aircraft, also referred to as ADG or Design Group 4 aircraft, as they reach the end of their projected useful life. This is estimated to occur within a few years of the opening of the new concourse at RSW. None of the major commercial aircraft manufacturers currently have a replacement aircraft on the books that would fall into this same Design Group 4 aircraft category, so we anticipate that these aircraft will be replaced by the airlines serving RSW with smaller Design Group 3 aircraft, and in some cases larger Design Group 5 aircraft. As a result, we are recommending that the taxiways and taxi lanes providing aircraft movement around the terminal area continue to be based on the larger Design Group 5 aircraft, but the layout of gates on the new concourse should be based primarily on Design Group 3 aircraft. To accommodate the future projected increase in Design Group 5 aircraft serving RSW, the team will also plan for modifications to existing gates such that each concourse will have 2 gates with a capability to serve Design Group 5 aircraft. At the time of our presentation in November, the team had initially recommended the number of additional gates to meet the 2035 demand as 12, more or less. Based on additional analysis, the current recommendation is to plan and design the new concourse for an additional 14 gates. This is based primarily on the anticipated mix of preferential use versus common use gates on the new concourse. The higher the projected percentage of preferential use gates means the greater number of additional gates that would be required to meet the demand. The estimate of 12 additional gates assumed that all new gates would be common use. While the trend at RSW is toward more common use gates, it was determined that a 50-50 mix of common use versus preferential use gates on the new concourse is a more realistic projection given our current mix is 67% preferential and 33% common use. Since the estimated cost per new gate as an allocation of the overall estimated project cost is approximately $40 million, it's important that we carefully consider the number of new gates that are required. This image shows an overall concept layout for the new concourse, including 14 gates that could serve Design Group 3 aircraft, shown here in red, with 2 of these gates also having the capability to serve up to a Design Group 5 aircraft, shown in blue. It is also worth noting that the proposed layout of the terminal expansion to support the new concourse will require relocation of existing gates D2 and D4 to the end of Concourse D, creating the 2 new gate positions shown here in red as well. This area currently serves as a ground level boarding gate number D10. However, since there are not any airlines currently serving or planning to serve RSW with aircraft requiring ground level boarding, the escalator and stairs serving the D10 hold room will be eliminated, creating additional space for hold room seating to serve these relocated gates. The apron level hold room area for gate D10 will also be repurposed. This slide shows the ultimate expansion capability for Concourse E to accommodate a total of 19 gates. While we don't know if these 5 additional gates will be the next location for additional gates at RSW, to avoid some of the complications that were anticipated in evaluating the expansion of the existing 3 concourses, the design team will consider this planned expansion to 19 gates during the design process for the initial 14-gate phase of Concourse E. The design will incorporate features to facilitate the future expansion of the concourse to 19 gates, with a focus on minimizing waste or rework and impacts to operations during construction of the expansion. Following our additional analysis, we have concluded that the addition of 14 gates in the form of a new Concourse E is a reasonably conservative target to meet the demand for March of 2035 at RSW. Based on the estimated completion date for the new concourse, the 14 gates should provide capacity to meet projected demand at RSW for an additional 8 years beyond the opening day of the new concourse. Keeping in mind the peaking characteristics for passenger traffic at RSW, the 14 gates should provide sufficient capacity for all but 15 days in March, or more than 95% of the days in the year of 2035. Based on current forecasts, for the rest of 2035 and the 8 years prior post-opening of the new concourse, the number of gates available should meet or exceed aircraft parking demands. There are a number of factors that could impact this capacity versus demand, such as the actual number of common use versus preferential use gates on the concourse, or the actual growth rate of passenger demand at RSW between now and 2035. These factors could either delay or accelerate the need for additional gate expansion to meet the demands projected beyond 2035. Our current estimated cost for the new Concourse E and associated improvements is approximately $600 million, but the actual final cost will be dependent on the design and the construction market, as well as many other factors. This image provides a concept for what the terminal expansion to support Concourse E will look like on the departures level. You will notice there is adequate space for additional ticket counters in a similar configuration to the existing terminal building. Similarly, we have planned for an atrium area like the existing atriums located at doors 2 and 5, which are the two doors at the ends of the crosswalk from the parking garage to the existing terminal. This new atrium will provide views from the front of the terminal to the apron and airside at the back of the terminal, similar to the existing atriums, helping to provide a look and feel of continuity from the existing terminal building to the expansion area. You will also notice there's adequate area for functions such as restrooms, concessions, and an elevated walkway that will connect the terminal atrium to the parking garage. Similar to the expansion that is currently underway for the existing terminal, Concourse E will feature an 8-lane security checkpoint immediately adjacent to the atrium, with a post-security walkway that will connect both Concourse E as well as all 3 existing concourses. On the arrivals level, the bag claim area will provide seamless connectivity to the baggage claims in the existing terminal, and the baggage handling system will be designed not only to accommodate the demand for the ultimate 19-gate version of Concourse E, but also provide additional capacity and redundancy to support the existing baggage handling system serving Concourses B, C, and D. During busy times of year, you have probably noticed that the curb front on both levels at RSW can become quite congested. To meet the demand for current terminal and concourses, as well as the additional demand resulting from Concourse E for the 2035 forecast, additional lanes will be needed for both the arrivals and departures level of the terminal curb front. The image here shows the anticipated improvements that will meet these demands, including the addition of a second curb and additional lanes on the departures level, and a third curb and additional lanes on the arrivals level. The additional lanes will extend to serve the new terminal area for Concourse E, And there may also be improvements needed in the area prior to reaching the current terminal, which is the area in front of the future anticipated Concourse A. These improvements may be necessary to help ease congestion on the approach to the terminal area and allow vehicles to spread out into the additional proposed lanes. The extent of the improvements needed in the area in front of future Concourse A will be based on a few factors, such as construction phasing and the cost benefit of making these improvements now versus later. The next several slides include concept renderings for the proposed improvements related to the terminal expansion and new Concourse E. This overhead view is an image of the terminal complex as it will exist at the completion of the current terminal expansion project. In this image, we have added an overhead view concept for the terminal expansion, including Concourse E, as well as a highlighted boundary showing the extent of associated improvements for apron and taxiway, taxi lane areas to serve Concourse E. We now shift to an oblique aerial view of the entire terminal complex looking toward the northwest, showing the terminal as it will exist following the current expansion project and the addition of Concourse E. You will notice the 3 elevated walkways connecting the parking garage to each of the 2 existing terminal atriums, as well as the atrium proposed for the Concourse E expansion. This is a view from the proposed expanded lanes on the departures level roadway at approximately the middle of the existing terminal. You will notice the proposed new outer curb, as well as a view of the proposed elevated walkway from the parking garage to the existing atrium on the west end of the terminal, which is door 5, with the proposed walkway to Concourse E in the background. These elevated walkways will provide enhanced passenger comfort and convenience, as well as improve safety and reduce congestion from passengers crossing in the at-grade crosswalks. This is an oblique aerial view of the terminal area looking toward the northeast, featuring the building expansion related to Concourse E in the foreground. Note the continuity from the existing building shape and features to the proposed expansion area for Concourse E. This similar image of the building looking from the apron or airside further reinforces the intent to maintain continuity between the existing facility design and the proposed expansion. As we have progressed through the concept development for the expansion related to Concourse E, we have also been keeping in mind the future and ultimate expansion of the terminal complex beyond the current master plan time horizon of 2040. This image shows an aerial view of the entire expanded terminal complex, which includes capacity for up to 75 gates to meet the future demand at RSW. It is worth noting that previous concepts for the ultimate capacity of the terminal at RSW only included 65 gates, so we've identified some additional growth potential as part of this process. It is also worth noting that 75 gates is more than both Fort Lauderdale and Tampa currently have, so we are prepared to meet the continued projected growth in demand for air travel in Southwest Florida. I'll now turn it back to Mike to cover the next steps in the master planning process.
Thanks, Darren. As we move forward into late 2022, we'll be preparing the facility requirements, alternatives analysis, environmental overview, and initial airport development recommendations. There will be an additional opportunity for stakeholder and public comment at that time. Thank you for viewing this presentation and your interest in the South Florida International Airport Master Plan. We encourage you to review the draft master plan materials and provide input and feedback on those and anything else that you would like considered during the master plan process. Project website and materials and link for submitting comments can be found at www.flylcpa.com/masterplan. The comment period for the demand capacity section, North Area Plan, and Terminal Gate Analysis will begin on January 31st and end on February 17th. All comments will be summarized and presented to the Lee County Board of Port Commissioners and the FAA and FDOT for consideration. Thank you for joining us.